Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Stephen Ellis, the Government Solutions Lead at Zoom. Now, Stephen, before break, we were talking about the people, the process, and the technology. We heard you kind of give great definitions of how you have to have great people. You got to have really great technology. But if the processes are broken or struggling or need to be updated, which we're seeing in many ways across a lot of the private and public sectors, that the people in the technology kind of fall behind too. So what can agencies do to begin that process reengineering, to upgrade their processes to meet the expectations of their customers, but as well as the technology of today?
Jason, that's a great question. I think one quick step that agencies can look at, and this is something maybe it's even at the division level, even at the team level, we can look at is what's that one day of the week. For some people, maybe it's Monday morning, maybe it's Wednesday morning. What's that day where you want to really start on the right foot, and subjecting everyone to 395 or the Legion Bridge or Route 50, putting them in that morning commute is going to sort of take everyone's focus away. So a quick win would be to say, let's take that Monday morning, let's own Monday morning, and let's make it remote, and let's have that touch base be remote and have people come in after that. That's maybe an easy way to say, we're not going to take a flex day. We're not going to take something that's at a level of institutional big P policy, but let's have that one meeting where people can remote in and have a level of focus, and then a much easier way to the office. As we're going back to work, those are the types of things that are really going to help. And I know there's a lot of considerations with unions and everything else, but if we look at these quick wins, I think we'll do a lot to build some of those cultural elements, those process elements that we talked about earlier.
And it sounds very simple, right? Okay, which day do people want to? We have the kickoff meeting for the week. We're going to talk about what our goals are, our objectives. Instead of folks coming in harried, oh, the traffic was a mess, my kid had to go to school and I forgot about the lunch or whatever. You're saying you're going to do it all from home. You may come in later that day, or you may not come in at all. But at least that first meeting, what you're saying is let's make sure we're focused on that first big meeting of the week.
Absolutely. I think it, and again, some people look at it as Monday. Some people say, you want to get that middle of the week and bring people back. I can see a lot of justifications for obviously either vision, but I think it's very focused, and it's important to have it as to setting a tone to say, we are going to value people. We're going to give people this high focused moment, and remote access might be a great way to do just that.
I love that idea. At Federal News Network, we do everything almost remotely, but I have to say that it's nice just to kind of pop up that laptop, get into my meeting, and then move on to my next thing. So I think that's a great idea, one we're doing for sure. And the leader of that, I think, that's got to come from two places. It's got to come from whoever that maybe executive is in the office, but it also should maybe come from the human capital officer, the Chico, who can kind of make some of these suggestions to how to improve those business processes. And again, we're not talking about serving the citizen business processes, but those other things that can be done to address workforce, if you will, happiness, because that's a key part of this.
Absolutely. Jason, when you started the conversation today, you made a great point. Earlier, one of the big switches, and this is maybe it happened 10 years ago, the chief technology officer, chief information officer went from being like a back room to a boardroom. And that move helped do a lot of the IT modernization. We saw from a cybersecurity perspective, we said the chief information security officer needs to be engaged in those very same conversations. And I would say today, the chief human capital officer, human resources officer, that person, he or she is going to have a wonderful insight into what the employees, how they feel, the tools and the processes and the policies that are going to empower them to do the work that they need to do. So I think that conversation is really, really important. The last thing that I would say to do as a CIO would be to deploy some new enterprise IT software, and you have to access it within a specific building at a specific time, a specific way, and not thinking about the broadness of the demand for that specific tool. We talked earlier about difficulty supporting that, and having intuitive user interfaces. I think these are the types of questions and these are the types of policies that human resources, human capital can surface and then drive across an agency And I think that's going to bring us to the type of transformation that we really need to empower our workforce.
And I think one of the things we can't overlook is that CXO community. You mentioned CIO, we mentioned Chico's. There's also a role for acquisition, a role for finance, all of those folks. And then the mission leaders have to come together. And those are also the people who are driving this return to work idea of what does the future of office look like? Are you starting to hear some of the agencies talk about how they think that their employees are going to work today, tomorrow, and 5 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're seeing a lot more interaction and sort of grassroots bubbling up and saying, no, this is the way we need to do things. We've seen it where there's a specific software, there's a specific legacy provider that people are required to use. And then people saying, hey, wait, actually, I would rather use, or I feel it's, I can do more and serve the mission better with this other tool. And again, without naming names, but I increasingly am seeing that. And I'm seeing CIOs saying, you know what, I've done a survey and 80% of my employees want to use this other tool. So I understand we have an enterprise agreement, but I have to think about the way my workforce wants to work. So we are seeing a lot of that. We are seeing a lot of, I mentioned earlier, the processes that were developed were done in a sort of pre-remote work era. And now we're saying, well, how can we best engage? And just things like I mentioned before, the webcam, maybe having that polish and professionalism of a webcam can be important. It may seem like a superfluous or luxury item, but if you're having a high involvement or highly emotional, sometimes even conversation with a constituent, or you're providing service to a disabled veteran, or you're doing something that you really want the polish of that interface interaction to be, very, very high. We're seeing the cultural changes, and this is coming where HR is informing the IT organization and saying we need these types of changes. So I think it's been a very good, coming together, and we definitely need to do a lot more of it.
One of the things that you hear a lot about, and I kind of made reference to in the beginning, is about the change of the office space, what that's going to look like. And I think agencies are starting to kind of, okay, hoteling, how do I make sure I get a desk on Thursdays when I'm there, or every 3 weeks when I'm there. Is that starting to be the next conversation you're hearing agencies have, is how much space do I really need, and what do I do with my current space, and how can I make sure that the folks who are there have space, and the folks who come in less often have space? What's the future of that? Kind of how's that being pressed against the need for technologies like from Zoom to say we got to make sure we're keeping people connected?
Absolutely. And these are the types of questions that are important to have. They can be loaded questions. Someone might say, I've been here for 25 years and I worked myself to that corner office with a view of Constitution Avenue, and now it's going away. I can imagine that being a very disconcerting moment, so to say the least. So I think we need to look at the modernization in a very human way, but we also need to say, look, we have a fundamental need to reorganize the office in ways that are more collaborative. Everything from just the words that we use that really speak to the era of and the ancientness of some of these terms. If you think about the silos, we say government was it's full of silos, and one of the things, the wins from COVID, is we were able to break down a lot of silos. Well, silos, obviously an agricultural term. We're talking about a farm. We're talking about a grain silo. And what was it, 100 years ago when people came up with that term? That was something that was in the common experience of all people to understand what a silo was. And yet nowadays, who knows when the last time we've seen one is. So that means we've had these silos for 100 years. And now we have an opportunity to break them down, because it's just as easy to talk to someone in a different division, a different agency, as it is to the person on your team. So when technology offers those opportunities, we definitely want to take advantage of them. And then from a building perspective, we need to make sure that we are, continuing that. So when we're in the office, are the people who aren't in the room, as I mentioned before, are they just a voice on a call? Are they just a small square on someone's laptop? Or are they present in the video screens on the wall? Is the audio optimized so everyone can be heard? If transcription or closed captioning or something is required? Is that relatively, is that part of the conversation? These are just small ways where we can really change how people work. Or when you go to a desk, is it intuitive to make sure that it's your line that rings and that you're plugged in and you're instantly on and all of your settings are there? So I think these are the types of questions that if we can do it right, we can make going into the office much more collaborative. Maybe it's not just rows of desks, but very, very collaborative spaces, because we're only going in to talk to other people and physically meet with some and have remote touches with other people. So if we take that philosophy and we spend a minute to say, okay, we're not in the lurches of the pandemic response, we just had to get laptops out the door as quick as we can. Now we can take a step back and say, how are we going to develop that office? So I think those are the important considerations.
I think agencies will have a lot of those considerations to keep in mind as we go forward, because things are going to change. We know that. Unfortunately for us, Stephen, things have changed because we're out of time. So let me thank my guest. Stephen Ellis is the Government Solutions Lead at Zoom. Always appreciate your time, Stephen. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, Jason. True pleasure, as always. Thanks for having me.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.